Accepting God's discipline. When we reap the consequences of our sinful actions, we must willingly accept this as God's discipline. Here's Gene.
Now here's one of David's strengths. He had sinned greatly against the Lord. Committed adultery, had committed murder. He had failed to discipline his sons. We know how he restored Absalom, and Absalom didn't even repent. And we know how Absalom from the story actually turned against his father, betrayed him, even tried to take his life. And as Absalom was trying to take his father's life, after he had ingratiated himself with the men of Israel, and David had to flee for his own life, and of course he had his loyal people around him. And as he was fleeing, he had an incredible experience. And the experience really was from God, even though what was said was very heart-rending and evil. And we find that in 2 Samuel chapter 16, in verse 7. Shimei. This was a man that was walking along the road. Shimei said as he cursed. Now he's saying these words to King David as David is fleeing from Absalom. Get out. Get out, you worthless murderer. This is while David is fleeing for his life. This guy is saying, you are a murderer. The Lord has paid you back for all the blood of the house of Saul, in whose place you became king. And the Lord has handed the kingdom over to your son Absalom. Boy, that had to be a painful statement in view of the fact that Absalom had betrayed him. Look, you are in trouble because you're a murderer. Now, try to identify with David trudging along, and he's trying to get out of the city. Absalom is behind him with his men going to take his life. And here's this guy along the side of the road is shouting out and screaming and calling him a murderer and say, you've gotten just what you deserve. Well, David's response is the real David. I mean, this is the heart that God saw in spite of his sin. We read, then David said to Abishai, who was one of his main servants, and to all his servants, look, my own son, my own flesh and blood, intends to take away my life. How much more now this Benjaminite? In other words, he's saying to his servant and all his servants. Then he says, leave him alone. Don't harm him. Because his servants wanted to take this guy's life. You can't talk to the king that way. And David said, leave him alone and let him curse me. The Lord has told him to. Perhaps the Lord will see my affliction and restore goodness to me instead of Shimei's curses today. And actually, David then, in the rest of the story, actually forgave this man and restored him, this one who was crying out these words. So David really realized that, he was guilty. In essence, he was saying, I deserve it. I deserve it. And I think the greatest strength here, in view of the fact that David could rationalize like any man could rationalize, as we saw in his story, at this point, he wasn't rationalizing. He said, it's me. I brought this on myself. Now, that's true brokenness. And that's the aspect of his heart that God saw in choosing David as a man after his own heart. So David recognized in this man the hand of God, and he accepted the discipline with grace. He accepted it with dignity. He forgave his persecutor. And as we think about discipline, my mind always goes back to Hebrews chapter 12, verse 5 and following. My son, don't take the Lord's discipline lightly or faint when you are reproved by him, For the Lord disciplines the one he loves and punishes every son he receives. Endure suffering as discipline. God is dealing with you as sons, for what son is there that a father does not discipline? And basically, one of the things that God was doing in David's life was disciplining him because he was his son. And he wanted David to repent and to return into the will of God and live within the will of God. And this leads to a question that I thought about as I was studying this story in terms of my own life or the lives of all of us today. How should we view difficult and painful circumstances in our lives, even if we cannot discern any specific correlation between these events and any sinful actions on our part? You see, if you look at Hebrews carefully, we can say, yes, Lord, it's one thing to be disciplined when you deserve it. But it's another thing to be disciplined when you can't discover a specific sin, where you're going through a trial, you're going through a painful experience. And if you look at Hebrews carefully, it's not just dealing with the sins that create discipline, it's dealing just with our Christian lives and the way God allows things to come into our lives to draw us closer to Him. And many instances behind that are things that God is dealing with in helping us to grow closer to Him. But the fact of the matter is, there are things that just are difficult to understand as a Christian when things happen to us. I just heard about a close friend and his wife driving down the highway, speed limit, coming back from their lake home. And all of a sudden, 3 teenagers drove right out in the middle of this highway. They ignored the stop sign, hit them broadside, and killed 2 of those teenagers. And one is, they don't know whether he's going to live or die. Now, they survived. It's a miraculous thing. The car rolled about 5 times. They survived. I just talked with him, and he shared what happened. And you look at a situation like that, and you say, Lord, why did you let that happen to my good friend? He serves so many people. He's a godly man. He wants to do your will. His wife as well. Why did that happen? I don't know. I can't answer that question. But I can take you to James and how James at least gave us a foundational truth. And we have a principle here. And here it's called persecution and trials. When we face various trials, we should ask God to help us view these painful experiences as opportunities to become more mature in our spiritual walk with Jesus Christ. And that's not easy, is it? When something like that happens. You have to live the rest of your life realizing that you killed 2 young guys, even though they were totally responsible. I mean, that's a burden to bear. And but what God says is, see purpose. Consider it a great joy, my brothers, whenever you experience various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance. But endurance must do its complete work so that you may be mature and complete, lacking nothing. And one of the things that I've learned, though it's not easy to practice, to see some purpose in a difficult situation, even though I can't specifically find the purpose, except to say, Lord, you're God. And though you slay me, yet I'll trust you, like Job did. And that's difficult, isn't it? That's difficult. Some of the things I look at that happened to me, I know I created it. I made a dumb judgment, or I made a mistake, or I set myself up. But there are other situations where I can't see any correlation. And yet, I'm to consider this as something that God can use in my life. And when he says joy here, great joy, I don't believe he's saying jump up and down with enthusiasm and excitement. But there's that settled peace to know that God is in charge of life, even though we can't understand it. So the question that I have to ask myself is, how can I grow through this? It's amazing. that can remove some of the pain. How can I grow? And what purpose can I see in this? Because the Bible does say all things work together for good to those who love the Lord, those who are called according to his purpose. And it's hard sometimes to see the purpose, isn't it? Except to say, Lord, I'll trust you, even though I don't understand it. But one thing I think we can conclude, no matter what the experience, sometimes Jesus simply wants us to grow closer to him. Just grow closer to him, to learn to trust him, even though we're walking through the valley of the shadow of death. I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod, your staff, they comfort me. That's a great truth. And I'm always amazed to see people who walk through these trials being able to say that with deep meaning and experience God's faithfulness and God's presence, even though they don't understand.